Hi, Andrea here. I hope you're doing well. Today, let's talk about carbohydrates and let's discuss if carbohydrates are essential nutrients or not. Now, obviously, disclaimer as usual, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, and I publish these videos not as nutrition recommendations but just for informational purposes only. Please do your own research and talk to your doctor. All right, so are carbohydrates essential nutrients? Do we have to get them from our food? So let's talk about macronutrients in general. There are three main macronutrients: fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Fats are essential. Yes, we have to get them from our diet. There are some essential fats like omega-3s and omega-6 fatty acids that our body cannot make from scratch. Proteins are also essential. So there are 9 essential amino acids. The amino acids are the building blocks for proteins, and our body cannot make them. So fats, proteins, they are essential. We have to get them. We have to eat them. What about carbohydrates? Well, so if you remember, carbohydrates are basically the simple sugars and the more complex sugars. And just for simplicity, let's focus on the 3 main simple sugars: the glucose, the fructose, and the galactose. There are some others, but minor. Galactose with glucose makes lactose, and definitely lactose and galactose are not essential nutrients. As a matter of fact, some adults cannot even digest the lactose and the galactose. What about fructose? Fructose, as we discussed in the sugar metabolism, can only be metabolized by our liver, and it's basically treated as a toxin and goes straight to de novo lipogenesis and contributes to fatty liver, visceral fat, and some other issues like inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, etc., etc. So, not an essential nutrient. Actually, it's harmful. So, what about glucose? Glucose is the energy currency of all living beings, and it's definitely a main source of energy, one of the 2 main sources of energy for our body as humans. But is it essential? Do we have to get it from the food? Well, as you might know, or as you might recall from other talks, we have a process in our liver called gluconeogenesis that can create glucose out of some building blocks. For example, amino acids, so proteins, and glycerol, which is part of the triglycerides, so fats. So technically speaking, if you eat fats and proteins, or if you have fats and proteins in your body, then you don't really need to ingest glucose, carbohydrates, in order to survive. Now, you might argue that a type of carbohydrate like fiber, even though it's not essential, it is a very good nutrient to get, because even though we cannot digest fiber as humans, our gut bacteria actually love fibers, and a healthy gut microbiome, which might be a topic for another video, is essential for your health. So there is an argument that ingesting fibers is a good thing. All right, so with that out of the way, let's talk about some few connected topics. So gluconeogenesis is a fascinating process if you think about it. If you are a healthy individual who is metabolically flexible, insulin sensitive, then when you eat, so when you are fed, you are using your glucose engine, your sugar engine. But then if you fast, after a while your body will switch. There will be a metabolic switch. So your body will go from sugar burning to fat burning, and your fat cells will liberate triglycerides, which through a process called lipolysis will get broken down into the free fatty acids. So each triglyceride is 3 chains of fatty acids connected by a backbone of glycerol. So lipolysis will break that down and use the free fatty acids through beta oxidation in all the cells, in all the mitochondria of the cells, to produce energy and ketones, etc. And the glycerol can be used by the liver to produce glucose. So think about how beautiful this mechanism is. So you eat, you use the proteins and fats and glucose, your glycogen stores, for energy, and then you stop eating, you go for a period of time without eating, and your body switches to fat burning, and a piece of that fat will be used to actually produce glucose through gluconeogenesis, to be used as energy or to replenish your glycogen stores for later use. Fantastic. Now obviously, if you're not metabolically flexible and you go many hours without eating and you cannot switch, or you go without eating a long period of time, even if you are metabolically flexible, there are cases in which your body will actually go after proteins. The glycerol will not be enough, and yes, you will use the proteins that you eat or your own proteins, the tissues and muscles, to produce glucose. So that's not good. That's not what you want. But if you eat normally, even once a day, and you eat proteins and fats, and you are metabolically flexible, you're good. All right, let's talk about the dietary guidelines for Americans. The dietary guidelines state that between 45 and 65% of your calorie intake should come from carbohydrates, and the rest a mix of proteins and fats. And what should those carbohydrates be, those 45 to 65% of the calorie intake? Well, let's divide the carbohydrates in a few categories. Now, there are fruits, which are a mix of glucose, fructose, micronutrients and fiber. There are vegetables, which are also a mix of glucose, maybe some minor fructose, I'm not sure, micronutrients and fiber. And then there is a category of all the processed, ultra-processed, refined carbohydrates. So let's put in that category all the grains, the flour products, the bread, the pasta, the pizza, the pastries, and then all the sugars, the table sugar, so the combination of fructose and glucose, the high fructose corn syrup, the fruit juices, the sodas, and all the packaged products that contain everything. So each of those categories of carbohydrates have a very different effect on our body. So the fruits, the whole fruits, even though they contain some good nutrients, micronutrients and fiber, they have a pretty high sugar content depending on the fruit. So I would say that fruits in general should be eaten in moderation as basically dessert and in season. And the fructose in them contributes to fatty liver, visceral fat, mitochondrial dysfunction, etc. The vegetables, the non-starchy vegetables, are predominantly fiber. So they don't contribute much in terms of glucose. They have a lot of good micronutrients. They don't raise insulin or blood sugar. The starchy vegetables also, they have good micronutrients and fibers, and some they contribute some blood glucose rise and insulin rise, but moderate. And then in the big category of processed, ultra-processed, refined carbohydrates, those are basically high glycemic index, high glycemic load kind of foods, a mixture of glucose, fructose, bad oils, fats, salt, that have all sorts of bad effects on our body. So with that said, a modern individual, probably, let's assume that they eat upwards to 70% of their calorie intake from carbohydrates. I don't have official statistics, let's just make numbers. And I would argue that a modern individual will eat, of those 70% of calories from carbohydrates, will probably eat 80% of those carbohydrates, calories from the ultra processed, refined, processed carbohydrates. And unfortunately, the damage that those products, those foods, those carbohydrates do to our body are not immediately visible to us. So we cannot from one day to the other understand what's going on. There are many, many issues. One of the issues is picking up weight. You slowly, year over year, pick up some weight, and you get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you attribute that to age, maybe. It's not age, it's what you eat and the time. And then there are other issues. So chronic inflammation, arthritis, heart disease, obesity, hypertension, cognitive decline. So should you eat those things? Well, that's your decision. I'm not here to say, no, you cannot eat those, you should not eat those. But you should at least know what they do to you, slowly. So you will finally see the results of eating that stuff late in life. And probably you will not even connect the dots. And maybe your brain will not work properly, and you will not understand that that's all the sugar and all the refined carbohydrates that you ate, all the chronic inflammation derived from those. So it's kind of tricky, and it's very difficult to connect the two things and take the necessary steps to either lower the consumption of that stuff or cut it completely from your diet. And I'm not here on my high horse saying, oh, you are bad, you are eating all those things, I'm good, I don't. No, I am a recovering sugar addict, carb addict. I ate carbohydrates and sugars all my life. I love them. I could feed only on cookies. But because I had the problem, because I had some of the symptoms, then I started on a journey, and I started studying and getting information, and I've started taking the steps to limit the consumption of that stuff. And I'm publishing these videos, and I'm doing this coaching thing because I want to help you do the same steps and revert the damage that we have done to ourselves for all these years. All right, so I hope this was useful. Hopefully this will make you curious, you will study a little bit, and the one great thing that you could do is just contact me. We can have a chat. I can give you more information about all this stuff. And if you have a weight problem or a food addiction problem and you need help, then you can hire me as a coach. I can help you out. So if you like this video, like it on YouTube, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends or family members who might need help or might need this information. All right? I hope to hear from you soon. Bye.